Hello and welcome to the Queen Bee podcast, where the stories of regional women come alive, resonate and inspire. I'm your host, Tanya Rutherford, and together with a passionate team of women, we've painted this landscape for you. In truth, this podcast is about gathering the stories of women who live in regional and remote Australia to bridge those gaps, to create communities, and of course, to tell the richness in their journeys. Now, if anything does come up for you today, please be kind to yourself. You can share it with us, whether that's through our socials, our Queen Bee community, or you can send us a DM. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Queen Bee podcast. Joining me today is Billie Muller. My favourite word to describe Billie is bubbly. We've known each other on and off for quite a few years because we both used to work at Central Queensland University. And now we are both doing our own thing with school-age kids. In the past, I've always known Billie as being awesome in the marketing space, and only recently came to know about her research experience and the resources she's been creating around being a mum-child ADHD combo. Welcome to the podcast, Billie.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
So tell us a bit about your journey. What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting journey, and it's definitely been a series of experiments, that have all seemed disconnected at the time and have shown to be a bit of a path, which I guess is everyone's life, really. But I think very much this year has been, the past couple of years have really been about getting to know myself and about permission giving.
Yeah.
And also about, I guess, opting out of the different, things that don't serve us. So that's a very general kind of
But it
thing.
sounds great.
I'm glad. So just for a bit of background for your listeners. So I'm an only child. I grew up in Brisbane with very artsy kind of counterculture parents. So my mum was the art critic for the Korean Mail for many years. My dad was the draftsman, but they're also very artistic in their own ways. So mum is a painter. And now she's retired. She's had several fantastic exhibitions. And dad is a musician and was very close to being an 80s pop star sensation.
Wow.
So there's always kind of been this vibe, I guess, in our life of, personal expression, but also because they were both freelancing, exploring the ways that you can make work for you and I guess contribute to the community in a way. Dad always volunteered, with golf clubs in different ways. So there's always kind of been this interesting, I guess, contrast of, how can you do something you're passionate about, but also something that's going to work for you. And yet it's funny because my parents were very adamant. They did not want me doing anything like that. They were like,
that sounds like parents.
Right? Don't make the mistakes that I did. Do a business degree, do this, do that. I went to boarding school. So my parents moved to Rockhampton when I was 15, and I completed my schooling in boarding school in Brisbane, did a little bit of uni down there, and came up for a uni holiday and got a little bit of work with council and realised, wow, working and getting paid is great. And also learning hands-on is great because I've always had, this underlying thought of why is this so hard for me? Why are things that seem so easy, like studying and being places on time and doing your homework and chipping away at assignments, why am I never able to do that? And of course now we know that ADHD in women is one of the most undiagnosed things. It's people, all these wowzer papers are like, why is it exploding? And it's like, well, the diagnostic criteria didn't include girls.
Yeah.
Still
Like most
doesn't
things,
really.
don't include women and female brains and stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. The DSM is so outdated. And so, even though like we look back and, it's pretty clear cut, it was really, this generation of girls that flew under the radar. And this intense pressure, I think also for women to be everything all at once.
Yeah.
And it felt empowering at the time. You can do anything. I would go to school. You can do anything. You can be prime minister and have a great family and do this and follow your dreams and be a great friend and enjoy a glass of wine at the end of the day. And that's all great. But you can't do everything at once. And I think the pressure to do everything at once or even want to do all those things can be really intense. Whereas more realistically, we all go through chapters. This is the parenting chapter. This is the career chapter. This is where I'm finally at a place where I can balance both or whatever. And also, I think, as I think Annabelle Crabb loves to say, a lot of successful men got there because they've got wives.
Yeah.
So it was interesting growing up in a family where it was very career focused and very purpose and achievement focused. But the rub was I'm a woman, which, we all think, oh, well, that's great and whatever. But, in reality, we do need to take time off to have kids. We do need to do, all these different things as the world stands. Yeah. And there's been so many times in my life where I've just thought, how is it that everyone can get their stuff together and I'm flailing, And it was really demoralizing. And it really wasn't, I think, until I had kids that the wheels really fell off for me.
Yeah.
I was in my early 30s. And I was in this role that was not quite an executive level role, but close. I'd done a little bit of management and really struggled because, having a young family and all these pressures, my brain just had enough. And it got to the point where I was in a meeting and I couldn't pass the conversation. I couldn't kind of keep track of, what was going on. And I've struggled reading emails and doing my to-do list and what have you. And I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, it sounds like anxiety. And, I did all the right things. I took all the drugs and nothing was helping me, and I was just so demoralized. And I kept on having my beautiful mother-in-law, who I love very much, going, you need a routine. This whole well-meaning barrage of people going, you know what you need to do, you know what you should do. And I would go, yeah, but I can't.
Yeah.
Why can't I? What's wrong with me? And it wasn't until I got my own ADHD treated, it was just such a relief. It was life-changing for me. And it's where I started to give myself permission and learn more about my brain and go, I'm never going to be able to do that in that way. And there's something really freeing about that, to go, in some ways, this world is not built for me, so I got to opt out of that particular thing or do it in a different way. And so I guess the great benefit to me being diagnosed before I had kids was I knew enough by then about how it presents, what it looks like, some of the issues that you have. And I'm also just fascinated by people. So, I would be like hyperfixated on whatever it was. And so my son came along and I think he was a 2 or 3. And I was like, I know what you got going on, because he was like a motor, just, and I just knew. So, and it's very, very hereditary. You see me and my father sitting next to each other, we're very expressive and we're always jigging and, our legs will be going at the same time or whatever. So what we essentially did was, knowing that both kids were likely neurodiverse, my daughter's in the midst of that diagnostic stuff at the moment, so we're not quite sure. But, knowing that it was likely, and at the very least, we've got a predominantly neurospicy family. I said, okay, I said to my husband, you know, we're going to have to just set up our family so it reflects that, because we've tried the other way.
Yeah.
You know, we've tried doing all the tick boxes and following the developmental things and doing all the stuff and, you know, sleep training. It doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for us. So, you know, if we want these kids to grow up and be functioning, happy adults, you know, if that's the end goal, to have capable people who won't need centuries of therapy, whatever, you know, I mean, they will, but probably for different things.
Well, I think all our kids will probably need therapy for different reasons.
Oh, and don't get me wrong, I love therapy. I think therapy is why I'm so well functioning today.
Yeah.
Love it. But, you know, we really said, okay, our household and our life needs to reflect that our brains have different needs. And that, you know, we're going to have to tackle things a different way. And yeah, so while I've always been in the marketing space, I found myself sort of doing a lot of research, doing a lot of work, seeing various health professionals and, you know, workshopping ways to work with our family, but also workshopping ways to advocate for myself at work.
Yeah.
Because really, particularly in the ADHD space, autism, because I've got a few autistic traits, although not formally diagnosed, but, you know, ADHD is still very behind with a lot of stigma. And it's very much still, don't disclose. Just hide it. Just, you know, maybe if you've got a trusted colleague or a boss, you can like be really like dismissive and like, oh, I've got this thing, but it's okay because
it's not going to cause any problems and it won't disrupt anything, and I promise I'll be a good girl.
And to be fair, my last role, I was working with this fabulous team who I just adored, and I did wait until I had a few runs on the board before I disclosed, which, you know, not necessarily the way to do it that I'd recommend to everyone. However, given that there's still a big stigma and still a lot of misunderstanding about it, you know, it's probably a reasonable thing to do. And I would say to my boss, just so you know, I've got some working memory issues. So this is the process I'm following, you know, and this and that. And just so you know, whatever. And it came to a point where I said, so I've been kind of bringing you on board with a few of my little quirks, and I want you to let you know it's got a name. I've got ADHD. And the reason I didn't want to just, you know, go out guns blazing with that was you might think what I thought, that it's 14-year-old boys running around a classroom. But it's not. The predominant thing is working memory, task initiation, you know, finding it difficult to map out plans or times. You know, it's that really high-level executive functioning and planning stuff that we really fall down upon. And it's also a barrage of stimulus. You know, we have so much input all the time that, you know, a lot of our other systems sometimes don't work as well because half our brain is busy. And it wasn't until I kind of brought her on board and said, just so you know, this is how it presents in me, and this is how it impacts our work. And I've got a plan, but also I need this from you. And it was about asking for accommodations and adjustments so that we could all win. Yeah. Because we had this conversation where she said, oh, and I really support you and we're very inclusive. And I said, that's great. That will take me to a point where if we go on the way we are and, you know, like I have a stressful time and the wheels fall off, you will be supportive for approximately 2 months, I reckon. And then I'll be on a performance review and then I will lose my job. I don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen. And we know that ADHD, it fluctuates. So there are some times where I will be bloody amazing. I will do the output of 2 people, you know, particularly if it's a problem to solve or something I'm passionate about. And there would be times when my team would be blown away by the sheer amount of work I would do. But there would be weeks where I would be burnt out or whatever, or hormones, which they don't talk about with women, but wow. And so I said to her, if we agree that my output needs to be at least, 85, whatever is a pass, the minimum to keep our team rolling, how do we ensure I'm meeting that? And what are the key things that I'm dropping the ball on? And for me, it was at a certain point for a short period, because I had some health issues, it was detail and some timelines and sort of that soft planning stuff. And so I said to her, we pulled together a planning spreadsheet and we put together some peer review guidelines and some other things. And it actually ended up benefiting the whole team. And we kept certain things we didn't need because it was about wasn't required. But there were certain things that actually benefited the full team because it was kind of allowing for the fact that people have different working styles. Everyone's capacity fluctuates, day to day, week to week. And what are the key things as a team we need to hit? And how can you organize the work so that everyone can do that, regardless of, oh, my kid's sick or my kid, there needs to be some safety nets for everybody.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've struggled off and on with burnout at different points in my life because, as I said, it's a fluctuating disability, and you can go all guns blazing and then realize you are pushing too much. And unfortunately, if you work a 9 to 5, you're required to do 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that we are still tied to these working hours that came from the 20s when people worked in factories and had wives and whatever. And, it was like the guy with the cigar who was like, well, let's give the workers who we flog some, safety. And it was just this arbitrary number.
I know, it's about the hours worked rather than their productivity or their impact or any of those things, because that is different for everyone, but we don't allow that to be different.
And it's funny because people talk very much about being inclusive and they don't have the practices. They don't have the procedures to back it up. They don't have the, okay, if we agree that everyone's got a different communication style, how can we know what everyone's communication style is? Like when I the last few jobs that I've had, I've sort of met everyone and said, just so you know, I can be very blunt. I ask a lot of questions, and that's how I learn. And it's never going to be implying that you should do things differently. It might just be that I'm just not up to speed. So if I ask you a question, it will purely be because I don't know. And if I think you need to change something, I will tell you because up front. And I had a lot of people kind of staring at me. I've gotten very used to getting a certain type of look. And I would say, well, why are you asking me? I'm like, well, I need to know how you talk. I need to know what you like. I need to know, and, I know that, Joe, doesn't like to have meetings before 10, or, Sarah really loves you to ask about her kids and give a bit of flowery small talk before you launch into things because that makes her comfortable, whatever. Everyone's got their preferences. And I think it's important to be like, this is what I need from you. And just so you know, this is what I will give you. And we all need to tailor ourselves. I'm not saying we should go through life masking, but, I think we need to be aware that different people have needs and ask people to meet us halfway and do the same. Because, at the moment, I find it's very much a cookie cutter. Well, this is professional, that's not professional. But that often caters to a specific type of personality, often the office manager or leadership, and their preferences. It doesn't actually reflect anyone's abilities or needs or preferences. It's these arbitrary values that, trickle down from top-down management, and are often unwritten rules. This is how you go. Like sales in corporate can be very cutthroat, and, this is my patch, this is your patch, and whatever. And so I guess, my journey has been very much learning the spaces that don't work for me, feeling like a space alien, for a lot of my life, and learning how to people. Because when you grow up neurodiverse and, child in the 80s, we didn't have a lot of support. Our parents didn't know anything about it. It was very much, and they all had, very established careers and priorities and, lots of pressure on women at the same time, but less support. So in some ways, children of the 80s were very much left to sort out their own shit, part of my French, but, sort yourself out. You'll be right. So I would study people. And, I went from being a horribly bullied, sad, lonely kid in primary school to going, right, I've got to learn how to people. I've got to learn, what to do in these different situations, and how to read people and, how to talk their language and what they're looking for from me, because I knew instinctively there were always going to be things that I couldn't give. I couldn't necessarily be the most organized or tidy or whatever. I actually got told I wasn't going to be vice captain in my high school because I didn't have my stuff together. But you're such an integral part of the school. If only you could be more whatever.
Yeah, if you could be someone else, that would be awesome.
If you could just not be you, we'd make you leadership. And it's really been, I guess, healing those traumas that we all collect along the way. If you're neurodiverse, living in a world that doesn't work for you, and really trying to heal yourself, and just a varying levels of opting out. I don't do party bags for my kids' birthdays. I don't do certain things. I ask the school to email me things, because anything that's paper is lost forever. It's black hole. There are certain things that I've learned along the way, and it came to a head with work. And I said, okay, if I know about myself that I have a dynamic disability that fluctuates, and if I know that I can never give, because I've given it a red hot go, but I can't consistently give 40 hours a week, however many weeks a year, I have to go into business for myself.
Yeah.
I have to be the one who manages my timeline, because I don't care how inclusive you are, businesses have needs. And I think that's valid, and I think when you're coming into a relationship and you're both upfront about what you need and you just can't meet in the middle, it's just not going to work, So I also found myself in a position where, I'd be talking to my girlfriends who got kids similar age, young school kids. And because they weren't diagnosed, often because probably they should be, but again, huge generation of women just left behind. And of course, big gaps in regional health services as well.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. You make do. Often in a regional setting, you make do. You work your networks, you talk to people who've been in the trenches. What did you do with your kid about this? What did you do? Because you try and get a pediatrician appointment. How? We're very lucky. We've got a fabulous pediatrician in Brisbane that we do telehealth with. But again, I also feel comfortable doing that because I know so much and we've got a shared language. Whereas if I was coming fresh, I'd want to see someone face to face. Anyway, so I was finding myself having all these conversations, where I'd be talking to someone and their kid might be autistic or have ADHD or whatever. And, things like, mornings are a nightmare. And I said, well, do you have a visual schedule? Or have you thought about using Spotify songs as a time limit? Or, whatever it is. These are some of the things we do. We do X, Y, Z. Or, do you have advice about, medication. And I've said, well, these questions to ask your pediatrician, ask them X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And it became very apparent that not everyone has got the time or the inclination or the health literacy to be on top of this stuff.
Mm.
And that I was in this really, interesting position where I've communicated everyone else's products and needs and thoughts ultimately my whole life. I've sort of been, responsible for bringing information, collating it, and then putting it out. And I've also had this great, our family is very embedded in health. So my husband used to live of uni.
Hang on a second, Billie, I'm losing you.
Oh, you got me again?
I've got you again now. You I've had a few bits where you kind of go, blah, blah.
That's probably not missing much. So I found myself in this position where I was at brunch and I was fielding all these questions, and I just wanted to. Oh, have I got you?
You're back again now.
Okay.
I don't know if it's you or me, but.
All right. All right. Are we on?
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's my connection or yours.
That's right. Anyway, you were at brunch.
I was at brunch. All I wanted to do was eat eggs. But I had about 5 women who were like, you've gone through all this stuff. I came home. I said to my husband, babe, do I need to run a town hall? Very flippantly. What do I need to do? And he looks at me and he goes, maybe you do. And I've always been saying, where's the resource? Because there's lots of resources out there for if you're neurotypical and you've got an ADHD or autistic child, often here's how you fix them or mask their stuff or get them to be normal. It's always deficit. Or, if you're an ADHD adult, here's how to hide your stuff at work and also, But there's never this intersection of you might be neurodiverse and an adult and a parent and everyone in your household is also neurodiverse. How do you make sure the wheels don't fall off? How do you talk to your kids about their brain so they feel nurtured and seen? How do you, balance and juggle the different things in your life? And that's kind of where the neurotactics concept has come into place, because ultimately I wanted someone to write a book and they haven't.
So you might have to do that.
And that's the thing. And I guess, there are a range of great and fantastic resources existing. And ultimately what I'd love to do as well is bring those to people's attention as well. So, not necessarily being I'm the expert. I see myself more as a community researcher, an advocate, but also someone who can bring people together and say, have you seen this great person's work in this space? Or, here are some questions you might want to ask your pediatrician sourced from whoever, or, whatever. Here's how you understand whether a study, works or not. Like, here's how you read the statistics or whatever. Because, not everyone has that. Not everyone should have that, but everyone should be able to answer some questions or at least think about what works. Because the other thing for neurodiverse brains is not everything will work for you. And not everyone presents in the same way. They say if you meet an autistic person, you've met an autistic person, because, everyone's got a little bit of something. People talk about the spectrum, and I think this very much applies to ADHD as well, as if it's a gradient, a little bit or a lot, low functioning or high functioning. It's not that at all. It's a spectrum is actually, you look at those color charts and it's, this and that. So you might have a child or an adult who, is great at one thing, but has severe communication issues, or, is great at this other thing, but, and it's very different, and it presents in different ways. And you might also, because it always fluctuates, be able to do something one day and not able to do it the next day for whatever reason, sleep, burnout, whatever. So, I really want to help adults, parents, professionals, and say, look, here are the resources, and here are some strategies you might try.
Yeah.
Pick and choose. Tailor what works for you. And here's the rabbit warren. Here's the road you might want to go down to, learn more. Or here's a nutshell, So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm looking at launching a website in 2024, which is exciting and daunting and scary. But it's really, I guess, sort of sloughing off the layers of should and can't and, not for you. Because what else do you do?
I feel like, I feel like if we treated everyone like that, then we'd all benefit, because in realistic, no one is the same as anyone else, regardless. And I know that's your approach sounds very much like the approach I have with teaching people how to learn, because it's all about who you are, what your situation is, what your circumstances are, what your past experiences have been, all brought in and rolled up in a bundle. And, one size never fits all. Sometimes it doesn't fit anyone, which is, I kind of feel like, the industrial age corporate structure is very much not really one size fits all, unless, you're not the one that's trying to fit other things into your life, like you mentioned. And I know with other startups, exactly like you say, they pretty much always have a wife behind them that does everything else. And yes, they can do these amazing hours, and they can travel, and they can do all these things because they have someone else to carry that. Because we're trying to carry that as well, it just becomes a different, we need to do it a different way, and we need to be 100%. Open and okay about that.
And I laugh. I see these self-help books written by men. Yeah. And, I have to say, I am a left-leaning, liberal, bra-burning, whatever. But the thing is, you look at things like Atomic Habits or 4-Hour Work Week or whatever it is. That's all very well if you don't have responsibilities for other people. Or you've got someone who can fill in the gaps. What do you do if you're a single parent? What do you do if everyone in your family is disabled and it's, on you? So, I think, and I also think, it was funny, I was talking to this girlfriend of mine, because I've sort of been, you need lots of validation when you're trying to do something new. I was like, oh, do you think there's a market for this? And she was saying to me, well, it seems to me like a lot of these strategies would work for everyone. And I said, yes. And she was sort of a bit flummoxed. And I sort of said, well, certain types of neurodiversity, if they're not acquired through trauma or whatever, we know that certain autistic brains and certain ADHD brains have structural differences. We know that. We've seen the scans, whatever. But they're also just traits that are normal traits that have been amplified. Everyone's had moments where you walk into your living room and go, why am I here?
Often. Most days.
or you lose your keys, or you do whatever. And that's often why this stuff is minimized, because doesn't everyone do that? Yes, they do. It's when it has a functional impact on your life and you can't participate in your life in the ways that you want. Often that leads to a diagnosis, but they're traits, they're normal traits that have been amplified. So what I really want to do as well is be, some of these strategies that I'll be sharing will be, this applies to normal brains, this applies to autistic brains, this applies to everybody, or this might apply if you're a parent, or this might apply if you're a child, or whatever. And I'm doing some really fun things with, airline how-to manuals and idiots guides. I'm going to have a few fun little, icons. because it just makes me happy. But you know,
And it does. It's a procrastination tip because I love going off
it's
to
all
these
it's
rabbit
the
warrens.
search for novelty and dopamine. But the thing is these if it's designed, if it's actually inclusive, it will work for everyone.
Yeah.
Because often the pushback is, why should I tailor all this stuff to suit one person? Why should I upend my classroom or my workplace or my family or whatever? All we do is tailor for this person. All we do is look after this one problem.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're just a whinger, they're just whatever. Why should we rewrite? And you go, no, if it's actually inclusive, it will work for everybody.
Yeah.
And someone might need a scaffold or whatever. And it's about that, equal versus equitable. Yes. Everyone wants to, if you've seen the graphic, everyone wants to look over the fence.
Yeah.
Some people are just short, and I think as a society, we sort of coming around to the fact that
Hello. Are you still there, Billy?
all right, I hear you now.
You're sort of coming around to you're sort of, and then you froze. And I thought you were thinking really deeply.
No, you're just frozen. So I was like, I'll come back. I think as a culture, we've almost come to the realization that disabled people are people, grudgingly. Yeah, they're sort of people. We'd like to not see them or hear from them.
Yeah.
But they're allowed, We'll allow, disabled parking and, braille and whatever and, sign language. We might think it's a bit, we don't want to have it in our face.
Yeah.
But I really think, we've got ramps. We've got ramps in buildings.
We even have lifts in some buildings, but they don't always work.
No, we've got, physical accommodations. We need mental ramps now. And we need to really come to grips with the fact that disability is not a dirty word. Ultimately, even though I participate in all areas of my life, I've got a disability. It's a hidden disability.
Yeah.
It can be really debilitating. And disability is not a dirty word. And I think, we've got this real fear, of being disabled. And actually, when I first kind of started toying with that concept, I hated it. And I was like, oh, I've got this thing, but I'm fine. And I'm actually great and whatever. And people talk about, their autism or their ADHD as a superpower or whatever. And in some ways it can be, just like everyone's got their strengths. But in some ways it's very disabling and it's very debilitating. And I think we need to let go of that feeling of people being valuable for their productivity levels.
Yeah.
And, people are just valuable because they're people. And that's been something I've really struggled with because, as someone who was always very aware of her shortcomings, I have worked really hard to prove my value and worth over and over and over. Yes, I've got all these problems, but here's how great I am despite it. And a big learning for me has really been sometimes I need help. And sometimes I'm not going to have weeks or chapters where, my output in certain areas is really apparent. But often it'll be because, I'm providing in different ways. Yeah. And that's valuable, and you talk about women's work and the way that we contribute to family and child raising and what have you. But, that real, what do you do? How do you do it? Who are you in regards to money, hours, whatever? People are valuable because they're people. And we live in this, this real culture of should. And, the social media has made it very open for people to give their opinion on everything. Yeah.
And it's not healthy because they use it as an opportunity to belittle people rather than uplift people.
And it's often I think it's a way to validate their own choices. Here's what I do. Here's what you should do. And, missing that connection. The number of people who, if you're going through a tough time, jump in with, here's what you should do. When they could start with, that sounds really hard.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. And I think, if nothing else, I hope that by sharing some of my stories and being vulnerable and, showing both the ways that I run things and the coping strategies that I use, but also the ways that I'm a big hot mess, can hopefully validate some people. Because at the moment, our understanding of neurodiversity and mental health is very medical.
Yeah.
Which has a huge place, don't get me wrong. But if we pathologize everything, then you take away people's ownership and ability to, manage the different parts of their lives and their lifestyle and all those ways that we know we can, support our brains and our bodies. And it becomes a series of, how do I fix myself? How do I get fixed? And then how do I fix you? And walking around, everyone's got this gaping wound or this big problem. And, people are just people, and disabled people are just people. And, no one's looking for a fix. What if you're perfectly fine with your disability and you just need some accommodations? And it's funny because people get very outraged as well. I think when you ask for certain things or you suggest certain inclusive practices, who are you to ask for whatever? And you go, who are you not to? Don't we all deserve a little bit of grace? I'll give you some too, if you'd like, And
I know we were talking the other day about how, and I guess because for a lot of our listeners, perimenopause and menopause is like a hot topic. So how has that been coming in the mix? Because I know it has been, but we again, think of everything in isolation. So, yeah. Give us a bit of an example of what that looks like for you.
Well, that was actually a big part of why I put a lot of those workplace things in place, because, and as I said to you, it hit me hard. And I think I was 36 at the time, which is not that uncommon. It's a little bit young, but the things they don't tell you about women's health, because no one cares about women's health. Oh no, you've got a uterus. That must be hard. Good luck with that. All these disinterested doctors, no studies, because ew, vaginas.
Well, it's more hormones. We're so unpredictable. It's just too hard. So let's just look in. Yeah.
And anyway, I have a whole rant about men and being
Calm
emotional. Anyway, so what I didn't realize was, firstly, that it was even really a thing that could last for 10 years, because they don't talk to you about this stuff. It's always very hush, hush. Oh, jokes about hot flushes. And they don't tell you about the huge, changes to your brain and your moods and your sleep, and insomnia and being just generally uncomfortable and cross at everybody and impatient, but how it exacerbates any existing neurodiversity or mental health issue. It just amplifies like loudspeaker. If this was a thing, it certainly is now. And wow, I've never felt anything like it. So I, after a lot of searching, finally found someone locally who could help, who was an expert in women's health. And I can only see her sporadically because regional health is just so under-resourced, and it's heartbreaking. And I only really, again, knew to go and seek her out and ask the questions because I belong in this club of people who've got a reasonable high health literacy, so I could sort of ask the different network of allied health people I know, or, doctors, whatever, what should I be doing? This is what's happening. What should I do? And so finally I found this great women's health specialist, and she's like, oh yeah, da 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 da. Game changer. Game changer. And, thank God for hormones and regulating them and sleeping again. But, there's a lot of women, I was reading this study, there's a lot of women who hit perimenopause and menopause and leave the workforce because the changes are so intense and you can't use it as an excuse. I had to say, I had to use euphemisms. I've got a health condition that's exacerbating whatever. Because, I knew after having my boss, my manager, who I just adored, she knew, but we would use code because it wasn't HR friendly, because women's health is acknowledged to not be a thing, but also the intersections of women's life aren't acknowledged. How women's lives will impact you at work, how it will impact your parenting, how, why is mum so cross all the time? Why is mum so, tired all the time? And it becomes this, again, this problem with you've got to fix.
Yeah.
How do we fix mum when actually it's a life stage? You know what I mean? It's not about how do we support this woman that is going through something that every woman goes through.
That we don't talk about.
With a series of, you'd hope, evidence-based strategies and support and community love. It's how do we fix this unhinged woman who is dropping the ball because of women's issues? And it's just wild to me. It's just wild, and I have to say I'm not surprised. I think when you've been around for a while, you're like, well, yeah. And I think things are getting better. There are more conversations happening in the public space and more conversations happening at home. But, it doesn't take away the responsibilities we get dumped on us.
Yeah. I think that doesn't change. That's still there.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, what, I see, and what I would always get frustrated with, and why, I guess I feel like I'm on this mission or this bandwagon or whatever it is, because people mouth their support. We're so inclusive. We love women. We're so diverse. And then their practices, whether it's in family or school or administration or health or whatever, don't support that in everyday life. Yeah. You don't actually walk the walk. You don't, if you've got someone with a working, memory issue and you rely on them to remember when their script is due because you criminalized their medication that they need to remember their script. How does that work?
Yeah. And you've got to have $100 to go see the doctor, and you've got to wait 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get in.
Yeah. You're a woman and you've got this physical, biological life stage you're going to, which half of the population has, and you've got 2 doctors, 1.5 in a population of 60,000 people, or greater region 120,000 to see them.
Yeah.
And resourcing, and we all talk about resourcing, we all talk about this, we all talk about that, but the stories that we tell in those everyday interactions is you don't matter if you're different or you're disabled or you're a woman. And for people of color, I'm a white lady, I'm middle class, I got a ton of stuff going on for me. So, very aware of the different ways I've got privilege, but, what do you do if you're a person of color, if you're Indigenous, if you're a migrant and English is your second language, and then you just get left behind because there are so many ways that, the world doesn't work for us. So what I really want to do is say, here are ways you can game the system and strategies you can use to support yourself. But also, if you just want to scream into the void, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Because we're living in a system which is inherently not made for us. And I think more than ever, people want to be heard. seen and validated and connect. And it's turning this real adversarial, you're a snowflake, or you're a this, or you're a that, or you're a, and you know, what happened to just being people, you know? Because everyone's got reasons. Everyone's got reasons for those, you know, sometimes quite interesting opinions they have. But, you know, if they've been through a valid life experience, fair enough. But no one ever asks the questions.
Yeah.
And no one seems to be taking accountability to say, well, you know, oh, it's just the way it is. So, yeah, I mean.
So coming back to you, how do you keep yourself grounded and cared for with everything that's going on?
Well, I joked about therapy. I've actually done a lot of it. And I really think, I joke with my husband that, you know, every functioning adult should have a certain amount of it, but I actually mean it because, you know, I think, and there's different types of therapies that work for different people. And if you're disabled, you might also consider things like OT and whatever. But for me, it's really been about how can I learn about myself? Because I spent so long masking all the stuff I was bad at.
Yeah.
And, you know, how can I put on the performance? And how can I just work myself out of this hole I feel I'm in? And it was this horrible thing of working so hard and still being crap at certain things, but being exhausted, you know.
Yeah.
So therapy, really looking at my priorities and talking to, you know, my family about, you know, we're really corny. We talk about family culture, you know, and it sounds really cringe when I say it, but we do. We sat down and I sat with my husband and we talked to our kids, and you know, we've got a little saying that we use. Mullers are kind, mullers are strong, mullers fix the problem, mullers get things done. And our family values are about, you know, inclusiveness and being kind to each other, but also kind to ourselves. Yeah. And showing up, showing responsibility, which also means taking care of yourself. And for us, you know, my husband and I have got an agreement that if the other person notices, you know, someone's got something going on, where it's bad back you're whinging about or whatever, the other person can voice their concern and you have to do something about it. Yeah. You know? And it's that accountability, but also I guess that empathy. And, you know, sometimes it's just giving yourself permission to do whatever it is that you instinctively know that you need. So for instance, for me this week, we're sort of going up to Christmas. Everything's been a bit hectic. I just had this day when I just wasn't functioning. And normally or often I would be really unproductive and also shame myself for that. Yeah. So you wouldn't do anything, but you still feel really crap about it. Yeah. And so I was like, well, you know, it's a write-off. So I'm just going to watch Netflix. And, you know, I watch Great British Bake Off and, you know, like be in my pajamas in the aircon and just I'll be like productive tomorrow. So it's, you know, I guess finding the ways to give yourself permission for the things that you need. And I really think as I get closer to 40, I'm learning how to do that. And everyone's version of that will be different, but I can only do that when got a bit of self-acceptance going on. And I go, these are the ways that I'm wonderful. These are the ways that I'm crap. I'm not going to be embarrassed about either of those things because they'll inform what I need. Yep. Because I spent so much of my life just drowning all that out because it was powered by should. These are all the things you do to be a good little girl and, you know, be a good mum guilt, be a good worker, be a good team player, you know, all the ways that sort of guilted into acting certain ways. And the more that I'm like, you know, I just can't fulfill that in that way. Then I go, okay, you know, this is how I roll. So, you know, like I know about myself that I will spend a lot of time researching and planning and thinking, and it feels procrastinating and it feels like a time waster until I'm ready to pull the trigger and it's boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And I've come to know that and accept that about myself and go, oh, I obviously need time, to pull the pieces together and to formulate and to mull on it, because every time I get there and and I just instinctively know it's time, and I can go, oh, time to pull the trigger, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And I used to hate that about myself, and I used to, battle it. And I'd set myself, writing limits and, Pomodoro things and this and that and whatever, or I'd just, sit and shame myself or whatever it was. But you just, the more insight you have about yourself, the more you will be able to give yourself what you need. And that's been my journey anyway. And when you use phrases like journey and self-acceptance, I just kind of want to like go in a cave and hide, because I feel
Please don't, because I love using journey.
no, but it is, and it's really I've found has been a journey of just dropping stuff,
Unlayering yourself like an onion.
Yeah, totally. Just, taking off the layers until you're like, oh, I'm finally comfortable.
So if you could go back to young Billie, what would you say to yourself? Or what advice might you give? And it may not be to young Billie, it could be the young Billies out there.
I think it would be, you'll get there. And I think it would be, your process doesn't look like everyone else's process, and that's okay. And also just generally, I think to like my younger self, but also women in general, you are doing the best you can. And if you could do it any other way, you would. If you could have done it any other way, you would have. Because, feels like at the moment, particularly, I don't know whether it's like post-COVID hangover or something, but it feels in a way like we're all in this stage of like existential dread, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, everyone's a bit on edge and a bit anxious, and you're just like, are the aliens going to show up or whatever it is? But, a lot of people are just, do you know what I mean? It's a vibe. It's a real vibe. And there's a lot of should, I'm hearing, and there's a lot of, did I do the right thing? And I don't know. I really don't know anyone. People talk about bludgers and talk about, I don't know any of them. I don't know anyone, whether you're a high income earner or a low income earner, whether you're on the dole or a single mom or whatever. I really don't know anyone who's not doing the very best they can with the resources they've been given and the background they've been given. I don't know. I don't know anyone who doesn't want to do their best. Yeah. And, some of us have to, try and escape the circumstances and traumas that have been dumped on us without our permission. And I think, there's a lot of people needing more support who are in holes. But even those people, they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
So, I would that would be my message to my former self, but also all the queens out there. You will keep getting new tools, keep getting new context and keep getting new understandings. But right now, using all of them at your disposal. What else can anyone ask of you,
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Billie. It's been lovely. And I'm just going to, excuse me for a second, I'm just going to see if I can tip down my computer so you can see what I've got. This is why I'm sitting here like this, is I've got this. This is the benefit of having a menopausal middle. Is it something for the pigs to sleep on? All the cats, all the kids.
I love that. Yeah.
Everyone loves the menopausal middle.
Total. It's the little mini spare tire that's like up in a certain way. Yeah. It was nice. Sylvie, my 6-year-old, was cuddling and she goes, "Mummy, you are so comfy."
Oh, mine do too. They're like you're like a giant cushion. And I'm like,
yeah, I got told I was like a beanbag. I was like, oh, I actually felt really nice about it. I was like, yeah, Yeah, you made that squishy tummy. Go you. You made
Yeah,
your
it's
own
all
pillow.
your fault. If you hadn't been in there, it wouldn't have had all this extra bit.
It's like, oh, babe, you shaped the world around you. You made yourself a pillow. Go you.
I love it.
Oh,
Oh dear. Well, thanks again, Billie, for today. We've been talking with Billie Muller, a creative problem solver and obviously a pig who likes having her head in my hand. With 17 plus years experience in marketing, Billie is motivated by her love of people, stories, and data, as well as working as a consultant specializing in email marketing and marketing operations. She is the founder of Neurotactics, and this is a website helping neurodiverse professionals and families navigate work, parenting, and the spaces in between. And it may even be launched by the time this episode comes out.
I hope so. Whoop, whoop. There's nothing like
And
a
if
deadline.
it's not, I'll be on to her. Don't worry. I'll be
There's
saying, come
nothing
on,
like a
Billie.
deadline, panic deadline. You've got to have one.
I know. It's always, that's how I got all my assignments done in school, was having extra deadlines.
Oh, totally.
Oh, good. Well, thank you again, Billie. It's been great.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I get to rabbit on to a captive audience. It's lovely. Thanks for having me.
The Queen Bee podcast delves into the heart of regional women's experiences, their aspirations, challenges, and journeys. It's a platform that celebrates their individuality, their resilience, and their ambition. These tales of reinvention, adaptation, inspiration, and the power of connections.